Hi everyone, welcome to Bonnie Carolee Makes Cards. I ordered one of the crafty boxes when Simon Says Stamp had their fundraiser for Huntington's disease. One of the many surprises was this awesome background stamp called Chunky Sweater. It is so cute, I couldn't resist doing it up in rainbow colors. So here we go. Chunky Sweater is a red rubber stamp mounted on cling foam. It is thick. I've removed the insert from my MISTI. The stamp is being inked up well with Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. I was just about to stamp and I stopped myself. The image on the stamp does not go edge to edge and I wanted to cover most of the panel. A creative corner, an accessory of the MISTI, positions the cardstock away from the edge. I always have temporary glue dots to hold my panels in place. The corner is removed and the image stamped. So the only thing that I didn't take into account was the top of the panel. The panel measures 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches, and I am going to be trimming it down so it isn't a problem. My plan is to emboss the panel after I've colored it, so the stamp is not removed from the MISTI. I do, however, have to clean the ink off. I like to use Simon Says Stamp's stamp cleaner. The dauber end makes it easy to apply. I then use a baby wipe to clean up the ink. Just like new, I don't want ink getting on my Versamark pad. The panel is colored with Copic markers. I have 6 colors of the rainbow represented and 3 markers for each color. This is very simple coloring. The dark tone is used in the crevices to create the shadow, and then I work towards the middle of the stitch with the medium and light tones. All the markers are in order. I color darkest to lightest, so my groups of 3 represent that. The coloring goes very quickly. Because I videotaped it, of course I know exactly how long it took me, 25 minutes. The stitches are colored row by row. I start at the bottom and work my way to the top. When a row is complete, I start back at the bottom with the next row with the color that would come next. For the most part, this approach worked out and I didn't end up with any stitches side by side that were the same color. Except for one time, and of course there always has to be one time. In that case, I just skipped over the color and moved on to the next one. If you are interested in the colors that have been used, they will be listed in my blog. So now that the coloring is complete, my panel goes back into the MISTI. The creative corner was in place, it is removed, and I use anti-static powder. The stamp is inked well with Versamark ink. I make sure to apply good even pressure across the entire panel. The panel is well coated with Ink on 3's Gold Rush embossing powder. Before applying any heat to the panel, I make sure that the heat tool comes up to its maximum temperature. There's a lot of embossing on this card and I want to minimize warping. I wanted the embossing to really stand out, so I'm going to be doing it twice. It goes back into my MISTI, again I take out the creative corner and re-stamp it with Versamark ink. After another good rub, the entire panel is coated again with the gold embossing powder. So this is where I always check very carefully to make sure that the new embossing powder is completely aligned with the embossed lines. It was fine, so I went ahead and melted the embossing powder. However, if it was not completely aligned, I simply would have brushed off that powder and left well enough alone. And I think this panel looks so cute. It reminds me of the wool that has the metallic threads running through it. Simon Says Stamps stitched rectangles, another treasure that was inside the crafty box that was sent to me, was used to die cut the panel. I had trimmed the panel down to measure 5¼ inches by 4 inches. The second largest die was centered on the panel and held down with a little bit of post-it note tape. I'm going to be retaining not just the inner panel, but the outer border that is created as well, so I will have a double-stitched detail that I love. The inner panel is mounted on black sheet foam. The border is centered on a top folding A2 size card base of Nina Classic Crest 110-pound cardstock. I almost always use liquid glue for everything. I love that it gives me just a little bit of wiggle room to make final adjustments. Next, I adhere the foam backed panel, and then I'm ready to start working on the sentiment. Simon Says Stamps Warm Hugs die set is the perfect companion for this stamp. I decided against using the shadow die. The fewer of those pretty stitches that I covered up, the better. The sentiment was die cut from pearl gold cardstock by Sizzix and black foam. In preparation for stacking the sentiment, the black foam die cut is left in its background, but the center of the letters are removed. Glue is applied to the foam letters. I use some paper towel just to pick up any excess glue. I just want a thin layer before I stack the gold cardstock die cut. Using a craft pick in the die cuts between the foam and the cardstock helps to get the final alignment in place. I did set this aside for about 5 or 10 minutes before I removed the excess foam. Glue on foam can take a little bit longer to dry, and the cardstock can slip if the glue is still wet. The foam die cut was mounted and highlighted with 3 pieces of gold confetti topped with Nouveau Crystal Drops Morning Dew. And that wraps up this adorable rainbow knitted card featuring Simon Says Stamps chunky sweater with the perfect sentiment, warm hugs. As always, I appreciate your visit.